And coming up on this week's show, the Secretary of State for Transport updates the Transport Select Committee on the DfT's performance so far. But what score does she get from green signals? Storm Claudia hits the railway, but one particular incident had a scratch in our heads. And Northern launches a plan to achieve 30 million more passenger journeys by 2030. We find out more. So welcome once again to Green Signals from me, Nigel Harris, and...
from me, Richard Bowker.
Right, on we go. A favourite Green Signals thing now is to not only report, but to analyse and interpret the often arcane proceedings in Parliament, specifically at the Transport Select Committee. Things are always said at the TSC that are very important, but they don't always see the coverage they might merit, probably because it takes a lot of time to watch and interpret the often 2-hour meetings. Apart from, that is, on Green Signals, where we're lucky to have not only Richard's expertise and experience, but his great patience in ploughing through all this stuff. There's been something of a recent lull at the TSC, but last week, the same week that the Railways Bill was introduced to Parliament, Secretary of State for Transport, the Right Honourable Heidi Alexander MP, was giving evidence to the committee on the work of her department, a mid-year report, if you like. Richard, what did you unearth for us? Many nuggets?
Oh, yes. There were quite a few. There were quite a few nuggets. Quick health warning. As you said, they're long. This one's 2.5 hours long, and it covered a huge amount of ground. Now, we're very conscious, obviously, here that we can't cover everything. So we have to do little clips and little pullouts. There's always a risk when you do that you might mislead or whatever, and that can have consequences, as the BBC have found recently.
Trump.
So we're very careful with the editing on this. However, there's still no substitute for watching the whole thing, and I do encourage people to do that. We'll put a link to the excellent Parliament Live TV channel on our website. And
why should you suffer alone, Richard?
Why should I suffer alone? That's absolutely right. 3 other quick comments. This select committee is one of the best I can remember.
I agree with that.
Like her predecessor, Ian Stewart, Ruth Cadbury chairs the committee very well.
She does.
And there's also, you sometimes forget which party they're from, which is a really nice thing. They actually have a proper, there's a sense of collegiate scrutiny, which I like. This hearing covered the Secretary of State's entire brief, right? So everything in transport. We're a railway podcast, so we're not talking about aviation, maritime, the Driving Vehicle Standards Agency, buses, right? Okay. That's covered if you watch the whole thing. I would make this point, though, and this is, in fairness to the Secretary of State, she is actually, I think, more confident and more across the brief on all those other things, and maybe a little less so on rail. Now, you'll form your own view, and this is very much a personal opinion from me.
Okay.
I just found that the other stuff, she kind of is across it. I mean, railways are complicated, as we know. There was a huge section on accessibility, which for railways is a very, very big issue in terms of station access and train access and so on. So we're not covering that today, Nigel. That doesn't mean we're ignoring it. It's a huge issue. I think it deserves a show on its own, actually. But I just want to point that out. If you think that it was covered a lot, you're right, but don't be cross as to the fact we've not covered it today. That's the reason why. Okay. So what did she say that was of interest? Well, let's start with something where it's due. She quite rightly praised the LNER train crew, the GTR station crew, and the emergency services who dealt so superbly with that terrible incident at Huntingdon.
I would like to say thank you to not only everyone in my team, but also the transport workers who have responded to a number of significant challenges and events, not least in recent weeks. And I think it would be remiss of me not to say thank you to the train crew at LNER, the GTR station staff, the first responders in the British Transport Police and Cambridgeshire Police, given the attack in Huntingdon on that train a couple of days ago. And had it not been for them, I think the incident could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, you're right, Richard. In some ways, I'm sometimes a bit conflicted about that because it can sound like virtue signalling. But in this instance, it didn't, because it was a heck of a thing that happened, and the people who responded did do a brilliant job. And she is right to say thank you.
She absolutely is, and she did the same thing at the RIA conference, of course. And
She
I
did.
thought it was very well said what she said there. Okay, so moving on from that, she was then asked how she felt her time as Secretary of State had gone, how she felt her department had performed. Bearing in mind she's been in the role for a year now. So she said a few things about how things that she had thought had gone well, but she also said, she was also asked, what do you think's not gone so well, right? And she said this.
Very quickly to touch on the things that perhaps, I think you also asked me, haven't gone perhaps as we might have liked. I would still like to see better improvement in terms of rail performance, whilst we have stabilised the situation when it comes to cancellations. I do think we need to provide good value for money for the taxpayer. People do pay a lot for rail journeys, and they need to have a service that they can rely on. So I'd like to see greater improvement there. I made the announcement about HS2 in the summer as well, where Mark Wilde, the new chief executive, is doing a full reset of the programme to calculate a new delivery schedule, a new cost ranges, and we need to grip that project given what the Stewart review and the report that we published said about the problems to date there.
Fancy asking a politician what didn't go well.
Well, she answered it. I thought she was fine, but then she's right. You know, she talked about things like the Driver Vehicle Standards Agency that hadn't gone so well. You know, there was still a backlog and all the rest of it. I just don't understand why she raised the issue of HS2. Because, like, she could actually legitimately say, I'm getting a grip.
Yeah.
You know, Mark Wilde's there. James Stewart's done his review. But yeah, that was used an example of something that hadn't gone quite so well. I didn't quite follow that. I don't know if you did, but I was a bit confused by that.
She missed the opportunity, which is unlike a politician, to turn a negative into a positive and make it look like they're doing really well. So there has to be a reason for it. And sadly, the cynic in me says it's just the fashionable thing to do to kick HS2.
And you know, do you know what? That's probably the most logical explanation. But I just thought it was a strange thing. You know, just if you're talking about things that haven't gone so well, just you want to be as few as possible, don't you? Anyway, let's get on to the meat of this now, Nigel. So next up is Ruth Cadbury. We've mentioned her. She's the chair of the committee. She loves to ask direct questions. There's a bit of the sort of the Gwyneth Dunwoody, you know. And she asked, what's going on with Northern Powerhouse Rail? When are we going to hear?
And when is there going to be an announcement about Northern Powerhouse Rail?
So I hope to be able to say more on that in the next couple of months. We are fully committed to ensuring that the great cities of the north of England have better rail connectivity. We do want to get it right, though, and following the publication of the James Stewart review, I think it makes sense for us to take our time on this and make sure that investment decisions are the correct one. I think we need to have an overall package of investment, if you like, because we need to be clear about what the economic objectives are that we are seeking to realise through investment. And I also want to make sure that it is balanced, east and west of the Pennines as well, because there's huge opportunity in cities like Liverpool and Manchester, but equally in Yorkshire.
How do I put this? It's always jam tomorrow, isn't it? It's it'll be coming soon. It's on its way. Oh, you be patient. Well, it's a bit like Keith Williams reports actions, isn't it? It's all been coming soon for a long time.
It's a very odd thing, though, isn't it? It's not just it's coming soon or in a couple of months, which I think is the line they like. They said that at the spending review. They said that when they published the infrastructure strategy, the industrial strategy, said it again at the party conference. But they always follow it up with, we're really committed to it, all right, which I thought was really strange. Well, if you're really committed to it, come on, you know, get on with it. And it's become a bit totemic now. It's, you almost sort of smile a bit because whenever anybody asks for a question about Northern Powerhouse Rail, any politician, in a couple of months. So that's a bit strange.
It's the railway equivalent of waiting for Godot, isn't it?
Well, it's rapidly becoming... It's rapidly becoming that. I agree.
We're those two old blokes sat there talking about when anything's going to happen.
Old blokes, easy, right? Well, look, moving on from Northern Powerhouse Rail, the committee then started talking about the costs of the railway, right? Play you two clips now. The first one was, this is an answer she gave. We're not showing the question, but the question was a very general one about costs. And so she sets the scene around costs, and this is what she said.
Post-COVID and post the pandemic, we obviously saw the rail network taking some time to recover. People start to work at home. Perhaps they weren't spending as much time in the office. That has really started to recover and pick up in the last couple of years, hence those figures that I talked about at the beginning of the meeting. We do need to reduce the amount of rail subsidy on day-to-day spending. We spend over £10 billion a year on infrastructure. That's taxpayers' money that goes into Network Rail to maintain the infrastructure, the signalling, etc. But at the moment, we're also spending about £2 billion of taxpayers' money on subsidising the day-to-day running of the trains. We do need to bring that down.
Now, before we discuss that, though, Nigel, here's a follow-up question from Ollie Glover, MP, who asked, OK, but what's the plan to bring subsidy down? OK, do you have a plan? And is it going to be more than just short-term cost cuts? And this was really interesting.
Just to explore a little bit more about what you said about reducing subsidy to the railways and tackling those costs. What is the department's plan for doing that? And how much is that going to look at increasing fare revenue compared to just cutting costs? Because I have to say, if I could just offer an opinion, it does feel that the focus since the pandemic has been on short-term decisions to cut costs rather than some creative or commercial flair to increase either the volume or yield of fares. But yeah, what's the plan to do that?
The quickest and easiest way to explain this is we need to get more bums on seats. We need to increase the number of people who are using the railways, because the less that we are paying as a country to move half-empty bits of steel around the rail network, the better value for money we will be getting. And so there is an ambition to continue to grow passenger numbers. I do think that in terms of reducing the operating subsidy, there are opportunities associated with rail reform. We have been clear that the management fees that we pay to the train operating companies annually is up to £150 million. There's obviously a saving when you're not paying that management fee. We also need to crack down on things like fare evasion, because this isn't a victimless crime, people not paying to use the rail network. It means less investment in train services. And so I think that's really important. I also think we've got a situation at the moment in the way that the rail network is structured, where train operating companies have employed hundreds of staff to work out who is to blame for delays. And they do that because they can receive financial compensation if it can be proved that it's a Network Rail fault. I want to get to the point where we haven't got hundreds of people employed in a blame factory, but where we've got hundreds of people who are working out how to prevent problems from happening in the first place.
I must admit, Richard, when she started going on about empty bits of steel, I thought she'd been listening to Andrew Gilligan. That you solve everything by selling a few more tickets, which sounds more cynical than I intend it to. But
and it's a slight improvement, actually, Nigel, because Alistair Darling, the late Alistair Darling, who I did actually like enormously.
Me too.
Used to talk about carrying a load of fresh air.
Air.
At least now she's talking about the half empty now, as opposed to completely empty.
So that's progress.
I suppose it's progress in a way, yeah.
Yes, Alistair did go on about that, bless him, didn't he? But what was all that about management fees? Chicken feed, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 150 million. I mean, I'm not being flippant. 150 million is still a lot of money. We can do an awful lot with.
But the billions we're spending, that's it, is it?
It's all the same points just get wheeled out, like sort of the tropes they are, really. So the management fee. And
on the subject of which,
I know you got quite excited about one thing.
Yeah, it's the constant presentation of we're sorting out 30 years of failure with our ideological magic wand. And when she goes on about hundreds of staff employed for blame attribution, she made it sound like this was done by the private sector so they could avoid cost or make money, or it's some grasping, cynical. And it hasn't. It's been there at least since the Railways Act and actually before. And I think that is what I think, what I said to you. We had a bit of a discussion off camera. That is manipulative. It's manipulative of history. It's manipulative of reality. And it is manipulative of what they want people to think. And that's what, because you and I will be as critical of the railway as we need to be if we think it's right. But that sort of thing, it really, really does rattle my cage.
Yeah. And I've got a lot of sympathy with that. I mean, delay attribution is something that's existed in the railways for as long as I can remember. British Rail did it. You cannot fix things operationally if you don't know why they are going wrong. So delay attribution is an extremely important part of operational management.
But the way she made it sound was, I thought, outrageous.
Well, we've asked them a question. We've asked the department to tell us exactly how many people have they determined are employed solely for the purpose of making money or sorting out performance attribution issues. And we await their response with
there's a thing.
Interest on that. And it will be interesting because, of course, for 6 years, all these train companies have been on national rail contracts under the control of the Department for Transport. So it will be a very interesting answer when that one does indeed come. Okay, so let's move on to the next section, which was all about business plans and scrutiny of them, but at a departmental level. So this isn't like an individual project, right? Steph Aquarone MP, he's the Lib Dem MP for North Norfolk. He asked a really clear and straightforward question.
It was, wasn't it?
It was, but listen to the Secretary of State find a very elegant way of saying, sorry, I haven't got a clue. And then the permanent secretary give an answer so convoluted it is straight out of the Sir Humphrey Appleby playbook from Yes, Prime Minister. Here's the exchange.
Steph. Thank you. This committee is very interested in its scrutiny function in understanding the structure and operations of the department, what it's trying to achieve and how it's configured to do that. Can I just ask a couple of quick plain English questions? What is an outcome delivery plan?
So, Joe, you might want to pick this one up. I can tell you what the outcomes we're trying to achieve.
We've got that. I'm interested in what the plan means.
So an outcome delivery plan is a organised cross-government to make sure that we are clear what the government is asking us to deliver, who is responsible ministerially and as officials, and what the metrics, the outcomes are that we are showing on demonstrating progress against. A decision has been taken this year not to publish those cross-government, but we are working on the long-term outcome delivery plans to reflect our spending review settlements and the legislative programme for the rest of the period. And we understand those will be published next year. It's a cross-government decision about how the government wants to approach business planning effectively and the information that it provides.
Okay.
Now, before we just talk about that, I know you're shaking your head, right? The back and forth on this business of the business plan, where's your plan? How can we monitor it? It was quite tortuous. And actually, at one point, Ruth Cadbury, it may have been straight after Steph's question, actually, Ruth Cadbury was clearly having none of it. And she said this.
Could I be more specific? Because, the main estimate memorandum for 2025 doesn't include the information of the link between spend and objectives. And we've been told the department has an outcome delivery plan, but it's not been published. And we are a scrutiny committee of government, are we going to be able to see these documents?
I think a decision was taken by the Cabinet Office this year about not making the outcome delivery plan available publicly. We are working on a longer term outcome delivery plan. And as Jo said in her answer, it is our understanding, pending discussions across government with the Cabinet Office, that longer term plan, the current thinking is that would be published in the early part of next year.
Basically what happened in that exchange, and as I say, Nigel, it went on for quite a while, right? It was a bit back and forth. All I think the committee was saying was, look, you bid for a load of money in the spending review, okay, to do stuff. You didn't get it all, but you did get quite a lot. So you clearly intend to do things with that money. What is the plan for how you're going to spend it? and how you're going to measure your performance in delivering the outcomes that that money's supposed to achieve, right? It's not a difficult question, which is why Steph asked it so straightforwardly. And yet they literally either couldn't or wouldn't answer it. It literally was a remarkable thing. And you do worry, don't you?
Well, it's especially interesting, is it not, given that a frequent departmental answer to questions about them meddling with everything is there's a lot of taxpayers' money involved and we have to have oversight. Well, we're not getting much here, are we?
Well, don't do what I say, do what I do. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I got that the wrong way around, didn't I? Don't do what I do what I say. Yeah, there was a little bit of that there. But it is quite a sort of a tortured section. And I don't think the committee got a straight answer to that, really. They were just told, well, let us know if you need any more information. And you could almost feel them going, yeah, we just like the plan that we want. Anyway, but then we moved on to Great British Railways. And things did get, I thought, rather painful, right? Here's a perfectly sensible question. There's two segments here. Perfectly sensible question first from Baggy Shankar MP.
What do you see as the main achievement to date of Shadow GBR?
So I'd like to thank Laura Schoaf, who's chaired Great British Railway Shadow Great British Railways over the last year. Essentially, she has been working on and convening a forum in which the leadership of, Network Rail, DFTO, parts of the DFT can come together to make sure that we are making progress in advance of GBR being set up, because we can't wait to bring about improvements and we can't wait to start shaping the culture of this new organisation. We can't wait until the legislation has passed, royal assent's been given and the organisation has been set up. So what I would say is I think we've made some real progress on providing integrated leadership in certain parts of the country. So we've got the alliance set up in the southeast of England now, which means that there is one person who is in charge of running both the train operations and the track. That is also going to be set up formally, I think next week in Southwestern, and we will also be doing that in the Greater Anglia area, which brings C2C, which is the other train operating company that's come into public ownership. And that's so we can get more joined up decision making between the people that are running the infrastructure and the signalling and also the people that are running the trains. So I think Laura has helped drive some of that process. She's also helped make sure that we are aligned on our performance targets. So we all know that we're trying to drive reliability, get trains turning up in stations within 3 minutes of the time that they're due to be there, reducing cancellations. And so I think she's really helped us with that piece around driving integration in advance of GBR being set up.
Now, before you respond to this, Baggy asked a number of questions about Great British Railways, including this one relating to the Shadow GBR delivery plan that he felt when Laura Schoaf, who's the chair of Shadow GBR, had said was going to be produced when she came to the committee and gave evidence back in January, right? So here's his question. Listen to this one.
And then finally, in January, when we had Laura at this committee, she spoke about having a delivery plan and making that available publicly. Has that what's the progress on that plan, and will we be able to see it?
Yeah, so I think when Laura came in front of your committee in January, I think I'd been in the job for about 4 or 5 weeks at that point. So we have established a slightly different way of working. I didn't require her to produce a delivery plan. She regularly updates me on the work that she's doing. I have regular meetings with all of the leaders from the rail industry, and Laura is part of that. And we agreed that she would also help focus on communicating some of the positive things that she has been working on and involved in. For example, those new digital pay-as-you-go trials, the rollout of pay-as-you-go more broadly. And so there isn't a delivery plan as such because we adapted our way of working.
the whole section lacked a certain pace, right? So Laura Shove came to the committee 11 months ago.
Yeah, she did.
And said, we're doing these things. And, Baggy Shankar was asking a question about a plan that is now nearly a year ago.
And they've nothing to say.
Now, yeah, and the Secretary of State made a perfectly reasonable comment. Said, well, I'd only just come into the job and I decided I wanted to do some things slightly differently. That's entirely fair, okay? But the problem is, you also remember Laura had said, in answer to a question from one MP, she said, well, we're not keeping minutes.
No minutes.
There's no minutes because I don't want to create, I want to kind of sense that we can all talk openly. So what we're now saying is there's no minutes of meetings. There's no plan. That's not how I want to do things. I basically just want to have kind of like little fireside chats to see how we're getting on. Well,
motivational talks.
Yeah, I don't think that's good enough for a process that we need to have real pace and targets and deliverables and action. And those two things feel slightly, out of kilter to me.
I mean, motivational chats this day. That was not the same, was it? It's action this day.
Well, action this day, yeah. So that was I felt a very unsatisfactory section, really. There was then a discussion in the committee about best practice sharing. So the point was made, I forget exactly who said it now, that Greater Anglia have just come into public ownership. Of course, they've been nationalised, and they're really good.
Success.
They're a great success. So how, said somebody, are we going to make sure that the things that they're doing really well, we can share that best practice around the network? And the good news is DFTO is going to have a performance director. Listen to this.
So how do we make sure that we capture the good things that organisations like Greater Anglia are doing and then translate it across the board before GBR is set up? So we now have a performance director in the DFT operator, which is the holding company for the train operating companies that are being transferred in. And I really see the role of DFTO as being critical in driving up standards across those 7 train operating companies that are already in public ownership. Of course, we've announced another 4 that will come across next year as well.
So I don't know what your reaction to that was. It reminded me of that rather famous joke that Ronald Reagan made in 1986. Do you remember that one? The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
That's right.
So, personally, I'd much rather that the railway operators talk to each other and shared best practice. I'm fairly confident that Steve and Jamie, and who's at Greater Anglia, and Lawrence will be able to sort all that out. So, yeah, not an inspiring bit, was it, that? Anyway, here's the final segment, Nigel, and this is an absolute corker, right? I think Ollie Glover lands a real punch here when he asks about East-West Rail, right? And I know I'm sort of in danger of sort of telling you what to think, right? But I think the Secretary of State really squirms and waffles in the answers here. It's quite impressive, actually, really, before she eventually decides to kind of stop and sign off with that tried and tested classic of, well, all the big decisions were taken before I got the job, so it's not my problem. Anyway, here's the exchange. It's a little longer, but it's worth a listen.
Thank you, Chair. Secretary of State, you'll be aware that more than a year ago, the infrastructure was completed and ready between Bicester and Bletchley for the proposed introduction of half-hourly Oxford to Milton Keynes passenger service. Now, admittedly, that line is being used for freight and charters from time to time, but it really is dragging on, isn't it? It's kind of like it's almost resembles some sort of Yes Minister sketch. A nice shiny railway, 2 new stations, but not a single passenger train. What has gone wrong? And when do you think we are going to see passenger trains introduced between Oxford, Bicester and Bletchley and Milton Keynes?
So we obviously made the announcement in March that Chiltern Railways were going to be the operator. Since then, they've been getting their drivers trained up. I think they've trained 44 train drivers now, and there's been a new facility created at Bletchley, my understanding is that the operating agreements required for the start of passenger services aren't yet in place. I know officials in the department are working closely with Chiltern on that because we obviously do want to make progress as soon as possible.
Let's push you a bit further on that. I mean, even that is interesting that Chiltern were appointed the operator in March. Why did it take until after the railway was commissioned to decide who was going to operate it and get all of that in place? I mean, presumably, sorry if I'm sounding flippant, presumably it didn't just come as an enormous surprise suddenly that, Network Rail or the contractors, whoever they are, woke up one morning and said, oh, it's all here and ready, signalling fully commissioned. I mean, why was that? Why? I mean, I'll declare I worked for East West Rail 5 or 6 years ago, and even then it was being debated who should operate it. Why does it all seem to have been left not just to the last minute, but even after the railway opened to be deciding these things?
Look, all I can say is that within months of me setting foot in the department, we took a decision and an operator was appointed. And I don't know whether Joe wants to comment on what happened prior to that. I think there was a decision to take because there were various operators that could have undertaken that phase one of the service between Oxford and Milton Keynes, and there would need to be a thorough process gone through to understand exactly the benefits of that bringing that operator in, the connection that they provide to other services in the area, the way in which you can provide an integrated service, I guess. But I do feel that decision making possibly predated me being in post.
I have to say, in general terms, I am quite pleased and grateful that Peter Hendy is in the role he is. I mean, wouldn't necessarily say that I agree with everything he's ever said, because I don't. But he does understand. He has got a good grasp, and he's vital now for driving through this bill.
It's going to be really important in the Lords, isn't it?
Well, that's where the challenge is going to be, because I think the Lords, they don't have a majority in the Lords, do they? They will. I think there'll be people lining up there to have a pop. They'll have an easier time of it, I would suspect, in the Commons. So thank goodness we've got Peter there, because I have to say, without him there, if we had somebody who really didn't understand rail, I'd be a lot more concerned about where the bill was going to end up, and indeed where rail was going generally, and on the back of that performance in the Commons, in the Select Committee.
You'll have to watch the parliamentary TV of that, Richard, because that's the sort of circumstance, knowing Peter as we do, where he'll probably be at his combative best.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I'm absolutely sure he will.
Right, before we move on then, Richard, what score would you give Heidi for that? For her, like they say on the dance-off on Strictly.
Never watch it.
Take nothing else into account. You're just judging this dance, so just judging her on that. Just judging her on the dance-off of her performance on railways at that select committee. What's your score?
Out of what?
10.
I'll go probably 3 or 4.
Oh, that's lower than I thought you were going to do. I'm going to go for 2 on the basis one really is an insult, but I thought it was pathetic.
Yeah, I mean, look, listen, we're arguing about it's a bit of a relativistic thing, that, isn't it, really? Because it ought to be higher anyway, whichever it is. I didn't realise you were going to quite do that, but okay. No, it wasn't great. And after, I just don't like this. It feels to me like there's a lack of grasp of things that could be fixed more quickly, but then it's probably easier for us to say because we're not actually doing it. But there you go, that's my view.
And just to close quickly on a repetition of the point you made earlier about how good this committee is, I've been looking at select committees for 20 years, and in the past, when Anne went up, you just knew what ideological BS they were going to come out with, and it was pathetic a lot of the cases. This is a good committee.
It is good. I agree.
So well done, you lot. Keep it up. Keep the pressure on. Okay, let us move on. At the end of last week and over the weekend, parts of the country and especially our railways were battered by Storm Claudia. There was disruption in many areas, North West, West Midlands, Great Western Main Line. There was some dramatic footage of a washout on the Marchers line between Hereford and Abergavenny. And I think you were caught up in the disruption yourself, my friend, weren't you?
I was. very sadly, I had to go to a funeral
Oh, dear.
of a former London Underground colleague. It was in Kent, so it's quite a trek from Chippenham. And by the time I got back to Paddington, the heavens had opened.
The monsoon.
It was really bad. I mean, there's the section of the Great Western Main Line near Corsham, which is very close to where I live. You can see from the images that exist of that, why they had to stop trains going through. Got to say, the communication from GWR Network Rail was very good. I was able to go via Westbury on the Berks and Hanson, then I caught the local train from Westbury to Chippenham. So I got home, but it was, there were some pretty serious weather issues on the railway in certain places.
Indeed. And once it gets over the railhead, that's it. Good night, isn't it? And a massive shout out yet again to the Orange Army, who did what they always do. They roll their sleeves up. They just got stuck in and worked not only impressively hard, but also effectively to get the railways reopened as fast as possible. And in case other people don't notice, we do, don't we, Richard? And so the three of us salute you all.
We do. In fact, I'm hoping in the next day or so to go out to one of the affected sites and see what remedial work's been done. Wasn't able to do it before we recorded this, but I hope we can do that. One thing that did pique my interest, you just mentioned about Railhead there, Nigel. There was a post I saw on a Facebook page called Railways of Cumbria, so shout out to them, that showed a Class 158 DMU at a stand with water on the track just ahead of it. Now, the photograph, which if you're watching on YouTube or on the Spotify video, you can see. If you're not, you'll just have to let me explain it. The photo was taken at a place called Heads Nook, which is between Wetherall and Brampton on the Tyne Valley line, the one between Carlisle and Newcastle.
Indeed.
And the Facebook post said this: 2 November 01, which is the 0542 Newcastle to Carlisle, was delayed by over an hour at Heads Nook this morning, 14th of November. After encountering this flooded section of line. And then the post went on to say, it finally arrived in Carlisle at 8:57, some 104 minutes late, after a Network Rail MOM, that's a mobile operations manager, had attended the scene. The Tyne Valley line timetable was seriously disrupted until mid-morning. Now, from the pictures, it looks to me that there is standing water, but it does not appear to have gone over the railhead.
Oh, right.
So I'm not sure about describing it as flooding. And, the rule book is quite clear on, what you can do. If it's up to the railhead, you can proceed at caution at 5 miles an hour, I think. Now, there does appear also to be a very small amount of running water coming perpendicular to the rail from the cess. But it doesn't appear to be of sufficient volume to have disrupted or risk disrupting the ballast, which is another issue in the rule book. But it is, of course, a static image. We can't actually see what's happening. So we asked Northern, and Northern said the water was above the railhead, hence the rule book had been followed to the letter. The issue had been called in, the MOM had attended, and they made the perfectly valid point. There were lots of speed restrictions across the rest of the line, which had contributed further to the delay. And of course, if we could be totally balanced about it, it's possible that in the time elapsed between the incident being notified and the photo being taken, exactly, the water level could have changed a bit. It is an interesting question, though. We'll come back to this. How do you assess risks at incidents like that? There is a rule book that explains what you do with water flooding. I just wonder, have we got a bit too risk averse, or is it actually understandable because these things are happening more and more now, and so on and so forth? So something I think we should come back to at some point.
I think the problem would be what you've just touched on, Richard. You could put cameras on trains and control remotely could make a decision on what they could see at that point. But of course, the water could have gone down in the 10 minutes and there could be ballast washed away that you can't see. And I suppose that's why you need a MOM on site to take a reasoned decision on what to do.
There are locations that do have cameras, though, for exactly that.
Yeah.
And experienced control people can take a decision.
Yeah.
I think it's one we'll do a little bit of.
Yeah.
I say deep dive is probably a poor choice of words given but I think it's worth looking at because it's something that's only going to get more of an issue. I think as weather becomes more uncertain.
And I suspect there is a degree of risk aversion in there.
Who knows? Who knows?
But there you go. All right, sticking with Northern, and some good news. It's launched a new plan to attract 30 million, you did hear that correctly, 30 million more journeys by 2030. I especially love this comment in the press release. The plan complements wider industry goals and the vision of Great British Railways, demonstrating that Northern is not waiting for structural reform to grow the market. Instead, the operator is actively shaping its own path towards a stronger, more reliable and more customer-focused railway now. I do love that, Richard. That's classic JFDI in action, isn't it? From Northern MD Tricia Williams and her increasingly energised team. Anyway, on that subject, Richard managed to catch up with Northern Customer and Commercial Director Alex Hornby to find out a little more about 30 by 30.
Alex, welcome to Green Signals. Thanks so much for joining us. 30 by 30, a really snappy title. Just give us a quick overview, what it is, and more importantly, how are you going to do it?
Right. Morning, Richard. Great to be with you again, talking to you from Manchester Piccadilly this morning. So yes, 30 by 30. There's three elements to our strategy at Northern, and it's all around how do we make the railway better across the north of England. One element of that is, as you had the very great conversation with Matt Rice a few months ago, which is around performance and achieving 19.2, 90% of trains to T3 and less than 2% cancellations. And 30 by 30 is another enabler of that. The third pillar is around ensuring we're keeping customer at the heart and what can we do to make customers more confident in the rail system. So there's three key messages inside the Northern strategy that we've been really clear. Tricia, our MD, is really clear about purpose and making sure everyone understands it. And of course, how we articulate that to the MERS and our stakeholders in the North is really, really important on the railway at the moment. So 30 by 30 is our growth strategy. And the aim of it is to grow demand by 30 million journeys across the north, across our network by 2030, with the ultimate aim to reduce net subsidy. So we attract more subsidy than we do customer revenue, and we really want to try and sort of change that balance by making sure we're more attractive to customers, and we attract more fares revenue than we ultimately do subsidy. So I'm pleased to say that we're on a good path at the moment. So and that sort of feeds into the key elements of 30 by 30. There's three things that we draw on inside 30 by 30 as well, which is if we carry on as we are, and based on what we're seeing the current growth trends across the railway here, we'll grow by around 10 million anyway. That's the general trends we're seeing based on current performance, current CSAT, current levels of service. We're not satisfied with that. We want to do more. So there's a further 10 million, we believe, by improving performance and the target towards 19.2. And then there's a further 10 million through a range of interventions, initiatives, things that we will self-start at Northern, things that are allied to GBR aims, e.g. FERS reform and the visions of the MERS, such as the FERS reform and pay-as-you-go examples that we're seeing across some of the integrated transport systems across the north now that the MERS are delivering.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a moment, but I did just want to go back to the issue of cost, because you very smartly got the answer in before I asked the question, which is very good. I mean, today, Northern is a subsidy railway. You know, there's an average subsidy per passenger journey. And if you are, you said there you were trying to get to the point where you reduce a subsidy. That's clearly the Secretary of State's objective. She talks about financial sustainable railway and bringing the cost of it down. But it's not quite adding up in my mind, right? Because every passenger you travel costs you money at the moment. So how are you going to change that?
So this is around attracting growth based on the current resource levels we've got. So the other key element of 30 by 30, this isn't necessarily around increasing train services. This is based around saying, with your current train set, for lack of a better term, how would you get more from it? How do you drive more value from it? So how do you fill up empty seats? And how do you do other things that bring revenue into the system? Now, obviously, the key headline is around journeys, but obviously in driving that, the ultimate aim of it is to reduce net subsidy, as you say. So there's a whole other host of activity inside the 30 by 30 strategy, which is around looking at ancillary revenues, where can we attract further revenue outside of the first system, such as advertising, car parking, better integration, repackaging of how we sell our tickets to our customers, added value products, rewards programs, all sorts of things like that are fed into this, which is ultimately around, as I say, more people on the trains, but that means more revenue inside train by train by train. Okay. And driving that is a big host of work we've been doing around capacity utilization. So essentially, where we've looked at where are we busy during the peaks, but we're say quieter during the daytime, and then what are we doing in terms of revenue management to attract more people to travel outside of busy time, so then we can top up the peak time customers where we know we've got ready-made demand waiting to travel, but capacity is putting them off. So we've laid that on a route by route basis, and the kind of routes, those kind of examples where essentially there's more leisure to sell and where peak capacity is constrained is interestingly a lot of it in Manchester in terms of the Manchester Glossop route, Manchester Rose Hill, but also some of the local routes around Leeds, such as Leeds Ilkley and routes like that, where we're having to essentially provide longer trains to cope with the peak time capacity, but then in the off peak it's quieter. So revenue management is going to place a big part in this as well, and actually that we've got quite a good track record on that in terms of advanced fares and how customers respond to that.
So let's just talk briefly about Manchester then, because that's a really interesting point. Because what I'm hearing you saying is, look, we've got all these initiatives. We haven't got any more money to spend, so we're going to grow this within the resource base we've currently got. So last week in Manchester, you and Transport for Greater Manchester announced a plan to simplify fares for those tickets bought on the day. Was that, I presume, the plan is to grow ridership off the back of that? Is that part of 30 by 30, or is that a separate initiative?
It's a key element of it. It was 30 by 30 was designed in mind, knowing that this was the direction of travel, particularly the MERS were taken in terms of integrated ticketing and transport systems inside their respective areas. So you're right, fares bought on the day, that'll see an average drop of 5.6%. So the average drop customers will see 5.6%. Obviously, the aim is that we will not see revenue drop by 5.6%. The aim is that a simpler ticketing system and a better value ticketing system will drive growth. So the aim will be revenue neutral. That's the aim. I think we believe we'll probably get more out of it, particularly when obviously we're starting with the simplified fares, which starts on the 7th of December, and that's off peak and any time. So just 2 fares replaced a whole range of fares on the day. And then what that feeds into in about 12 months' time is we'll start to introduce tap on, tap off, pay as you go, integrated with bus and tram and cycling, and making it a truly integrated system.
So hang on a minute. So I am a bit confused now, right? So the average fare in those 96 stations in Manchester has gone down by 5.6%. Right? So with the same number of passengers, that means revenue has to fall, right? I mean, that's just math.
With the same number.
So you've got to either grow the number of riders or it's going to cost money. However, the aim might be to be revenue neutral, but surely there's a lag. It doesn't happen overnight, because if it did, guess what? We'd all do it. So in the medium term, well, however long that is, there must be a cost of that. So is that coming out of your budget or TFGM's?
So it's being funded, and I don't know exact number of. I can't give an exact figure of what that number is. But we are comfortable in Northern that we are protected in that sense. So we're all signed up to it. So we are not worried that this will be a northern problem, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
And obviously, as you know, our aim is not to necessarily generate profit. It's nigh impossible, as you know. So what we're trying to do in the whole space is how do you reduce burden on taxpayer, and that goes back to the whole net subsidy issue.
Yeah.
But we are comfortable that we are protected in that space.
I suppose sort of final question, really. I mean, there's kind of, I'd almost call it a quiet revolution. You might call it something slightly different, but, there's a lot happening at Northern. There's the Northumberland line. There's, your kind of your new route mapping, which has made things, I think, a lot easier for people to understand. There's a huge amount of stuff that you're doing about customer experience. Matt's doing all the stuff he's doing around performance. How you're on a journey. I know that's an awful phrase, but you know what I mean. How does it feel it's going, Alex? I mean, do you feel as if it's turning the corner now?
Well, the biggest metric I will look at is what's happened in terms of revenue growth, what's happened in terms of customer growth. Are our customers happier? They're the outputs, aren't they? And obviously there's a whole host of things that feed into that Matt and others will look at as well, that we all look at as a team anyway, as you can imagine. So we've had our best revenue week ever in October, which we don't normally expect. That was our best revenue week we've had since the Black Friday week last year, but it's past that. 9.3 million we got in 1 week. We've had our best performance in terms of customer numbers since COVID, and we've had our highest CSAT figures in terms of what our customers telling us as well. Now, and this is where 30 by 30 really rings true, because we're getting those levels, but as you say, we're on a journey. So we know there's even more headroom once we sort performance out, once we get 7-day railway established, once we make more trains run on time, once we improve capacity, once we improve fleet availability, and so on and so forth. And I think that demonstrates that if we're performing at the levels we are now, and I think we're the highest performing regional railway in terms of growth, I think that's what we say is just imagine what happens when these initiatives really take hold. And I think that's the thing that really makes us exciting. I think that's the thing that keeps us sane, excited, whatever word you want to use. And I think it is, I've always said about Northern, the reason I took this job in the first place was it's just got incredible potential and opportunity. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that's most exciting about it. And I think actually what the MERS are doing will enable that, because they'll bring funding, they'll bring headlines, they'll bring the things. And we are, 30 by 30 has been it's completely aligned with them. When we first launched it internally, so to speak, we did a world tour, as we say, of all the MERS. And we went around them and said, this is what we're thinking of doing, but we want to make sure it's aligned to your vision. And that's a key element of that, because there will be trade-offs within it. And I mentioned some of the excitement around the initiatives are things like, are we truly reflecting what the market of the railway wants in 2025 and beyond? So there are the things that will start to feed into this plan straight away. Because as you say, we have to see some of these green shoots now. It isn't about waiting.
You know what's great about this? You're not waiting for rail reform. You're not waiting for Great British Railways. You're just getting on with it now and cracking on. And I think that's brilliant. Listen, we thank you for joining us. It's a great initiative. Anything that grows the revenue base has got to be a good thing. So, Alex, thanks so much and good luck.
Thank you, Richard.
Alex is also a bit of a force in nature, isn't he? He's another man who looks at a problem and immediately says, we can do that, and gets stuck in and does it. So we've got to wish him well on that, haven't we?
Absolutely. There is an interesting little sort of codicil to that, though, of course. Do you remember last week we asked, so this thing in Manchester, who's actually paying for that initiative? Well, it's pretty clear from that Northern aren't. So I think we will need to come back to that, because for me, the question's still out there now, which is, and what is that costing? It's a good thing, but I just want to know what it's costing. So,
well, it is, and as you know, we've sort of said there, what's it costing? And Alex has said, well, we're not paying it. That only leaves one, doesn't it? So
it would appear so.
Put them on the spot, Richard, and I know you will. And now it's time to thank everyone who supports us. First of all, our thanks to RIA, the Railway Industry Association, for being our programme supporter, and to Rail Business Daily, our media supporter. Then a big thank you to everyone who has left us a super thanks on YouTube this week. And you lovely people are Rob Staffordian, Richard Skelton, Alan Kirkman, Chris Exley, Mike Heinson-Evans, John Kirkman, John Stokes, Bob Walsh, the Independent Brigline Rail Group, Alistair Rutledge, Louis M., Peter Curtis, Nigel Mapston, Techno Andrew, and Andrew Shenton. We really do appreciate so many of you leaving us super thanks, which do help us to achieve what we want to do here. So thanks ever so much indeed from all three of us.
Absolutely. And thanks also to John F.K., who has joined us as a gold level member on YouTube. So
welcome,
thank you,
John.
Indeed so. So thank you to all our supporters and members, to whom we're very grateful. We list everybody in the credits at the end of the show. If you're not already a Green Signals member, please click the join button on YouTube or click the Patreon link in the description to find out more what we offer. You get early access. We do some visits around the network. We do some exclusive videos. We've even got some branded Green Signals stuff. So do take a look.
Can't beat a bit of merch.
You can't.
And now it's time for this week's Railway News Roundup. TfL has had to withdraw its brand new CAF trains from operating on the DLR as a result of a braking concern. An incident occurred when a train did not stop in the planned position at a platform because of low adhesion due to wet weather. TfL says it is not an issue with the older fleet. It's worth noting that the introduction of the B23 trains was already 18 months late, and we understand that the trains had undergone extensive testing and assurance ahead of them being introduced to make their introduction as smooth as possible. Unfortunately, TfL can't say when the B23 trains will be back. Stuart Harvey, Chief Capital Officer at TfL, said, "I'm sorry that we've had to withdraw the new DLR trains from service, but safety is always our top priority, and we need to understand what happened before returning them to service. Introducing new trains is never without challenges, and until our engineering teams complete their investigations, we will continue to operate DLR services using our existing fleet." CAF does seem to be in the news a bit at the moment, Richard, doesn't it? But not for the best reasons.
No, they've got issues with 197s, they've got issues with these, all sorts of stuff. I'm sure they're working very hard to resolve them. Anyway, thanks to Jim Millington for notifying us of this one. According to an article that appeared in the Daily Telegraph, the Treasury are considering replacing RPI, the Retail Prices Index, in the formula that drives the annual fares increases with CPI, which stands for Consumer Price Index. Now, that's still a measure of the average change over time in the price of goods and services bought by households, but CPI excludes certain things that are in RPI, and the net effect tends to be CPI is a lower cost. So this could have a benefit. You know, the average fares will go up by a smaller amount than they might have done. And personally, I've always thought actually CPI was probably a better measure of underlying inflation. I wonder with this whether what's actually happened is post-COVID, price elasticity of demand, what happens to volume as you put prices up, has actually softened a bit, and now they need to be a little bit aware of that. I don't know, but it's anyway speculation at the moment, and the government have said we don't speculate on stuff like this, but it'll be interesting to see if this does come about.
Won't it just? And of course, the differential between RPI and CPI is often, of course, of some issues in pay negotiations, isn't it, as to which one you use. Now, His Majesty King Charles III was in Wales on the occasion of his 77th birthday last Friday. And whilst he was there, he popped into Taffs Well depot to declare it officially open. Taffs Well, of course, is the base for the Class 398 tram train fleet. And we visited there in January, or rather Richard did, when we interviewed Chief Executive of TfW, James Price. And there's actually a pretty good picture of HM the King on the stage with James, which we are sure he will be treasuring for a long time, probably on his sideboard as we speak. It was, by all accounts, a wonderful event. Well done, TfW. Quite the achievement, and what a way for His Majesty to celebrate his birthday.
Absolutely. What did you do on your birthday?
I opened a tram depot.
A tram train depot, yeah. Anyway, thanks to John Kirkman for this one. East Midlands Railway's Class 810 bi-mode Aurora trains are finally to begin entering service in December. Originally planned to start running in 2022, would you believe?
Is it that long ago?
Yeah, the Class 810s will enter service, but as single, i.e. 5-car units. So they've bought a load of 5-car sets. There are still some issues to resolve before that they can run them as 2 5-cars, i.e. as a 10-car train, right? And we understand the date for that is still uncertain. Although, even in 5-car formation, they will provide customers, say, East Midlands Railway, with 24% more seats and over 19% more legroom, which is good compared to the Meridian train sets they're replacing. I suspect this comes as a relief, actually, because the Class 222 Meridian units have been going off lease in September. If you remember, 5 of them, I think it is, are going off to Lumo for use on the Stirling to London Euston open access route, running a diesel train under the wires most of the way. There you go, said that out loud. But anyway, I suppose, the 810s coming into service will be a welcome sight, I'm sure, on the Midland Main Line.
I do love that 19% more legroom. How accurate is that? Measuring there. But, it throws into sharp relief, doesn't it? The Class 99's been introduced in, 5 months?
Yes. Yeah, no, fair point. There's nothing else I can add to that.
2022. I had not realised it's been that long. Wow. And that's the news roundup for this week. If you'd like to send us any snippets of news, then you can. You could drop us an email at news@greensignals.org. We can't promise to read them all out, but if we read yours, we'll give you a name check. So big news, little news, whatever you spot that you think might be interested in, do send it to us.
Indeed, which means it's now time to do the quiz. Now, last week's question was a listener question from Vince Chadwick, and it was this. What is unique about Merchant Navy class steam locomotive number 35006? Now, I deliberately didn't mention the name, which in its full version is Peninsula and Oriental Steam Navigation Company. A bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Some answers said that this particular steam locomotive worked with the same tender all of its life. And it was only allocated to one depot, which was Salisbury. Now, I'm sure that those statements are true, but whether that makes it unique, i.e. only worked at one depot or the same tender, I've no way of knowing that. But what I do know is it has the longest name of any steam locomotive in preservation. It's extraordinary, isn't it? And that was the answer that we accepted. And the winner from the many, many, many people who got that correct was Mervyn Partin. So well done, Mervyn. If you send us an email again to quiz@greensignals.org, then I will get your mug out too. I'm pretty much up to date on them, actually. I went to the post office with a lot of mugs yesterday, so we're in pretty good shape now. Anyway, to this week's question. Ongar Station lost its tube service as recently, actually, as 1994. But even though there's no tube service there now, Ongar is still very important for the day-to-day operation of today's tube network. Why? Okay, why is Ongar still really important? If you think you know, answers to quiz@greensignals.org by midday on Saturday, November the 22nd. We'll put all the correct answers in a hat and select one at random to win a mug.
35006 might have been unique among the Bullieds, I suppose, in being at one shed, but not unique among Pacifics. It sticks in my mind that one particular A3, which I cannot remember, spent its entire working life at Carlisle Canal Shed. Well,
there you go.
And before we go, we've talked about the longest name, Richard. What was the shortest?
Oh, you're asking me?
On a mainline steam locomotive.
GNU.
It was. A B1. Can you imagine? I think the nameplate was about this big.
Tiny.
You could have made it into a key ring, but there you go. GNU.
There you go.
Absolutely. And here's some excellent news to end on, Richard. Samir Zitouni, the catering crew member credited with very courageously and putting himself at considerable personal risk saving lives on the LNER train involved in a knife attack on November 1st, has been discharged from hospital. Hooray. His family said in a statement that he still has significant recovery ahead of him, but it's wonderful news to hear that he's well enough to leave hospital. Samir, known to all as Sam, was one of 11 people injured during that dreadful incident, and his actions have been described as, quote, nothing short of heroic by none other than the British Transport Police, who have, of course, seen the train CCTV. So thank you, Samir, Sam, and everyone else involved that night in preventing this from being far worse than it actually was. Green Signals salutes and thanks you all.
Absolutely.
And sadly, that's all we've got time for this week. So thanks so much for watching or listening as usual. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Just click the little button and it doesn't cost you a penny. And if you really want to support us, find out about joining Green Signal's membership on YouTube or Patreon. But most importantly of all, join Richard and me here next week for this show, which will always be free. So we'll see you then. It's goodbye from me and
It's goodbye from me.
have a splendid week.